China has summoned the Japanese ambassador over comments made by his prime minister on Taiwan.
China and Japan have been locked in a diplomatic standoff that threatens to derail trade between Asia's two largest economies.
China and Japan relations have worsened after Japan's new Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi said that if China attacked Taiwan, it could seriously threaten Japan's safety and might require a military response under Japan's law. China, which says Taiwan belongs to it, reacted strongly. A Chinese diplomat posted, then deleted, a harsh and threatening message about Japan's leaders, leading to official complaints. Chinese state media accused Japan of returning to its wartime man's side, and China called it Japan's ambassador to protest. The disagreement has spread beyond politics. China has reportedly stopped some Japanese fish importing and advised its citizens not to travel to Japan, leading to many tour cancellations. Japan criticized China's language and sent a senior official to Beijing, but the talks achieved nothing. Takaichi has said she will not take back her remarks. The tension is linked to bigger issues, including Taiwan's importance, Japan's closeness to Taiwan Strait, and the long-standing historical territorial disputes. With neighbor country willing to step back, relations are at a low point and the tensions in the region are increasing. Welcome to East Asia Dove. We're talking about the conflicts between China and Japan in 2025. We're going through in different point of view with more details. So let's jump right into it. When people think of countries Japan doesn't get along with, South Korea often comes to mind. But right now, Japan's most serious and fast-moving tensions are actually with China. Tourism is getting hit, trade is under pressure, political relations are worsening, and while the headlines are full of sanctions and warnings, the real center of gravity in this fight isn't missiles or warships, it's supply chains. And more specifically, a highly specialized semiconductor material most people have never heard of, photoresist. Today's episode is about how a diplomatic clash spiraled into economic retaliation and why the most dangerous weapons in 2026 might be chemicals, tourists, and export approvals. It started with a statement that Beijing views as a radioactive Taiwan, right? So after Japan refused to retract comments about Taiwan, China didn't just complain, they moved fast. Chinese state media signaled Beijing was ready to use every retaliatory tool it has. Trade sanctions, economic pressure, diplomatic freezing, and military exchange suspension, travel restriction, import bans across key sectors. The message was basically, Japan, prepare yourself. And Japan does have to take it seriously. China may rely on Japan for only a small slice of its total trade, but Japan depends heavily on China. China is Japan's biggest import partner and one of its top export markets, with nearly 300 billion in annual trade. So once Beijing starts pushing buttons, the question becomes, which button hurt faster, right? The first clear target is seafood imports. China announced that a halt on Japanese seafood. But here's the twist. China already wasn't buying much Japanese seafood after the Fukushima treated water release. This year, it was only around 500,000 worth. Basically, it's nothing. So economically, this move wasn't the big one, but symbolically, it was huge. Markets reacted like it was a major shift anyway. Stock traders in Korea saw the headline and jumped in instantly, assuming Korea might benefit. Prices surged before everyone slowed down to check the details. And Taiwan grabbed the spotlight too, posting photos of officials eating sushi, signaling support for Japan. So even at the small stage like of the retaliation, the ripple effects were immediate. Headlines move money even when the underlying numbers are tiny. And then came after that is a move that hits faster than tariffs. China issued a warning for its citizens to avoid traveling to Japan. Technically, it was just a recommendation, but in China, that often means don't go. Don't dare you go. Travel agencies immediately canceled tours. Airlines waived fees, and nearly 500,000 Chinese bookings was like evaporated. That matters because Japan relies heavily on regional tourism. China, Korea, and Taiwan make up roughly 60% of all visitors and are right. Before this clash, Chinese bookings were up 25% year on year. Overnight, it's gone. Tourism and retail stocks dropped hardly. Shiseido fell nearly 10% in a day. The Tokyo Disney operator dropped almost like 6%. Faster retailing Uniqlo sank as well. Meanwhile, Korean travel agencies jumped as investors bet displaced Chinese tourists might reroute to Korea instead. This is the modern version of economic coercion, right? Not a formal embargo, but just a recommendation that empties hotels and duty-free shops. Next is escalation, is entertainment. China halted approvals for Japanese films. Titles like Crayon Shinkan and Sales at Work, those famous animations, postponed was like definitely. To understand why that matters, consider scale. China has the largest number of movie screens, over 90,000. Like in Korea, it's only 3,000. And China's box office is about 90% domestic. And foreign films face strict access limits, but Japanese animations had been one of the rare foreign success stories. Films like Suzume, the animation, and Miyakaze, the latest released reportedly, made more in China than in Japan. Now that door is closing. And remember, China hasn't allowed a single Korean movie into the theater since 2016, right? Because of that dispute. Yet Japanese films has been getting through until now. They're earning enough. So when Beijing wants leverage, it doesn't only look at steel and silicon. It looks at attention, screens, and pop culture, because those can be turned off instantly. Now we get to Japan's biggest fear, rare earths. China controls around about like 90% of global rare earths, processing the dirty, toxic, refining step that's difficult to replicate quickly. It's the bottleneck no one wants to own. So except China already does it. And when we've seen this movie before in 2010, China used the rare earth as a leverage against Japan during a territorial dispute by cutting off shipments. Japan carved within days. And when China restricted exports, at least one rare earth, yttrium, reportedly skyrocket is like 4,400%. Well, that's why this is considered a strategic weapon. It doesn't need to be used often. The threat alone reshapes behavior. The U.S. is trying to break defense too, like signing deals with Australia, Malaysia, Indonesia, and other countries. But mining isn't the main bottleneck. Processing is, and China knows it. Japan has been scrapping for alternatives, including a joint U.S.-Japan rare earths project near Minamitori Island, a tiny island that gives Japan a massive exclusive economic zone, EEZ, nearly 12 times the size of Japan's landmass. But deep sea mining and processing are expensive, slow, and nowhere near ready to scale. So when tensions rise, rare earths sit in the background like a loaded weapon on the table. So then came to the moment built for social media. A viral clip showed a Japanese diplomat appearing to bow deeply to a Chinese counterpart who stood confidently with the hands in his pockets. That's later proved to be quite rhetoric. And Japan insisted the clip was misleading, saying he was leaning toward the interpreter, not bowing. But China portrayed it was like a domains. After the meeting, Beijing described the talks as unsatisfactory. Whether the clip was fair or not, this is not part of the battlefield to optics. And optics shape public mood. Public mood shapes that a government can do next. So, back to something interesting. Both China and Japan started acting unusually friendly towards Korea. The compliments, warm words, even hints of support to sensitive issues like Dokdo. Not because they suddenly love Korea, because they were trying to win Korea's favor while fighting each other. This whole situation starts to look like a political campaign session, right? The season of complaint of the political thing. Everyone smells wider and bows deeper when they want something. For now, Korea benefits quietly. Rising stocks increase the tourist potential and rare diplomatic affection from both sides. But long term, this triangle isn't built for stability. When the dust settles, China and Japan will likely return to their usual posture, and Korea will lose this temporary spotlight. For this moment, though, yes, Korea is smiling while the two giants clash. Now here's where the story gets even more modern and more dangerous. At the center of this conflict isn't only just tourism or seafood or films, it's a semiconductor bottleneck, photoresist. Recently, Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi said that if China were to attack Taiwan by force, it could become a survival-threatening situation for Japan. China reacted strongly and the war of words escalated. Soon after rumors spread out on Chinese social media, Japan, the rumors claimed, had cut off exports of photoresist to China. and that Chinese semiconductor factories could be forced to shut down within a month. Japan officially denied imposing a blanket ban, but officials also said they would not comment on individual export controls, leaving plenty of room for fear. So why did this rumor cause panic? Because photoresist is not just another chemical. Photoresist is a light-sensitive chemical used in semiconductor manufacturing. Put simply, the silicon water is canvas. The lithography machine is the brush. So photoresist is the ink. Without all three, you cannot draw circuits on a chip. And the real crisis appears in advanced chips, 7 nanometer, 5 nanometer, and cutting-edge AI processors. For these, especially with EUV, lithography, photoresist supply is almost entirely domined by Japanese companies. Why can only Japan make it? Here's the reason. Because it's not an ordinary chemical. It must remain stable at the molecular level, resist water contamination, and perform perfectly under extreme conditions. Even tiny effects can ruin yields. And worse, they can damage lithography machines and cost tens of billions of dollars, potentially stopping entire production lines. Japanese firms have spent decades building this expertise, and no country has fully caught up. China has tried to develop its own photoresist, and in some areas it's made progress. For older, less advanced chips, domestic options work reasonably well. But for cutting-edge semiconductors, Chinese versions often struggle with low yield and, in the worst case, can damage expensive equipment. That's why even China's leading chip makers hesitated to rely on domestic photoresist for top-end processes. And there's another issue. Stockpiling is almost impossible. Photoresist has a shelf life of about 6 months, and its practice sometimes closer to 3. So you can't quietly buy massive quantities and store it for emergencies, meaning China can only use what Japan is willing to supply when it's willing to supply it. This is what makes the rumors so destabilizing. It points to a choke point that can't be easily bypassed. Japan didn't stumble into this position by accident. Years ago, Japan was on the receiving end of China's rare earth restrictions. That experience was a shock. Since then, Japan has worked systematically to diversify rare earth supply sources, build strategic reserves, reduce overall usage, strengthen supply chain tie with the U.S. At the same time, Japan focused on becoming indispensable in key technologies, industries that others can't easily replace. Photoresist is a prime example. Japan also passed an economic security promotion law, giving the government clear authority over exports of strategically sensitive materials. And notably, the politician who led this effort is the current Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, which suggests this confrontation isn't just emotion, it's policy, long-term planning. So what does this mean for the rest of the world? Supply chains are no longer just the economic system, they are strategic weapons. China has rare earths, Japan has photoresist, and the US controls key chip design tools and manufacturing equipment, and South Korea and others have learned how dangerous defense can be. Japan's move sends a clear message. In the modern world, power doesn't always come from arms. Sometimes it comes from a chemical formula no one else can make. For now, we're watching a standoff that is playing out across every arena at once. Trade headlines that move the markets even when the numbers are small, tourism warning that areas 500,000 bookings overnight, film approvals used like a political switch, rare earths looming like a threat, and semiconductor materials becoming the quiet center of gravity. The Japan-China standoff is just the beginning, and we will be here watching it unfold.